We've all heard of it by now, right? It's not the 80s anymore, and rolling dice to kill monsters isn't some occult, secretive activity for acne-riddled boys and their introvert friends. If you do it right, it can be you who rolls the dice and kills the monster, acne or not. I am pretty confident in saying everybody should, at some point, give role-playing a try, make up a situation, gather some people, invent a character, and just play. Obvious recent popularity aside, it's already one of the most accessible things ever, since humans have been doing it since forever. Movies, theater, and improv are just advanced forms of child's play, right? And I'm not blowing anyone's mind by saying this, but I still feel it's important to accentuate, because it can be easy and appeals to a base instinct we all have. There's so much to say. And you know what? I'll say it. Yeah, I've been cooking this up for a while, and I think it's about time. Play tabletop RPGs. Create and pretend and learn and grow and, just have some freaking fun, man. Oh, but how? It's scary and it makes me feel insecure. Meeting new people is difficult. Being creative doesn't come easily. And what if I'm boring? I know. I know. I've got a certain number of things to say around all of that. Matter of fact, it's all very silly, really. Most depictions of Dungeons and Dragons or similar things boil it down to the essentials. An average Joe, probably a teenager, is pretending to be a noble knight defending the kingdom against some unspeakable evil or a huge monster or a combination of the two. The knight, however, is not alone, and this is really crucial to the experience, as everything the party do is, at the end of the day, collaborative. And if you want it to be that way, it can be, and it can also be something else. I've often heard negative reactions around the focus on violence in D&D. Monsters will need killing, and many role-playing systems encourage it. But, of course, more experienced goblins will know it's not always mandatory, and often giving storytellers and players the chance to sidestep all of the sword clashing and magical fireballs for more interesting approaches is pretty good. Avast, ye great paladin! Sheathe your great sword and unbuckle your armor, for a new challenge approaches. The king has summoned you to court for an audience, and what you say will change the fate of all. Something like that, at least. There's so many things to find in a role-playing game for everyone, and I mean that. I've seen sci-fi and magic schools and treasure hunting, interstellar diplomacy, and a million other equally engrossing and silly things to be found and, ultimately experienced. Some are more famous than others. Several are interesting, but maybe not for everybody. Many lack wide appeal, but can teach you valuable lessons on how to improve your regular sessions. Regardless, I'm straying off the path a little, but in my own words, D&D or any other equivalent role-playing game is like you and your friends decide to abandon the repetitive day-to-day for a more diverse experience. Using a tool all of us have, our imagination, and convincing one of you to be the storyteller, you spend hours imagining what a maybe cool but not too cool handsome elf dressed in obviously copyright-free mithril armor and wielding a ridiculous bow might want in life besides fame and riches. That's not everything it is, but it kind of boils down to that in the end. You'll have an idea, you'll need people to play with, you'll take this idea to a certain degree of detail and will end up, probably months later, wondering about some things you've already imagined, some things you've forgotten you've imagined, and debating whether or not an imaginary town does or does not have a general store, then haggling over how many pounds of fish it would take to topple a levitating dinghy. It's quite silly. And hey, It can be simpler. Don't take it too seriously. It's a lot. You can just be real people and discuss how you're feeling about an imaginary situation. And that's awesome, you know? You can be mice, men, aliens, immortal, tormented souls during a time loop, Groundhog's Day apocalypse scenario, whatever works. And because it's complex, you'll need to figure out what doing the thing really is. So, you know, just give it a try. I promise it'll teach you something new and may even be fun. So, how... Whoa, hold on. You mean to tell me that a game that was made for nerds with poor social skills is now a pinnacle of entertainment and subverts a lot of tropes? And it creates unique and original moments to experience outside of a consumerist media landscape, and requires very little actual investment but is ultimately infinitely complex, has real world skills, and... Oh, come on, I need friends to play with? Well, yes, or sort of. You need people. We all do. Universal truth and all that. There's a certain dissonance between the idea of playing a pretend acting game and needing real life relationships with people, but it's true that the more you get along IRL, the better the fantasy will play out. You're in a monkey's paw situation, and if you take the deal and go out there, you gotta meet some strangers and hope it works out. It's not quite dating. Sure, it's still tough for a lot of people, and meeting with a group you found online that you've never ever seen before is, at least socially speaking, risky, but it's a very good way to meet people with a similar interest. They all want someone to play D&D with. There's plenty of Discord servers and message boards and websites and apps and whatever to find them. There's a big trend nowadays for all the hobby shops to host D&D events or general role-playing or board game nights. There's no easy way to find a group though. I know it sucks, because you still have to go out there and say,
"Hello, I'm a little goblin gooby guy and I've never played this in my life and may be terrible at it, and I'm deeply insecure about my abilities, but I would like to play pretend with some other people."
Eventually someone will come along and eventually take you on. If you've got friends you can convince, then so be it. Do that. Much easier. And then if your friends no longer want to play because it's cringe or they've got places to be on a Saturday evening, then searching a group online will be a little easier. And you'll learn something new about your friends. So if you find a group, then what? Honestly, set it up. When do we play? What do we play? What do we need to bring? Those would be the essentials. I won't mention any needs for rule books or equipment, since it's all a Google search away and mostly can be accessed for free, so just don't worry about that. However, do worry about one thing, one small but great and equally dangerous thing. And that's, scheduling. The worst enemy of any group activity ever is the schedule. You must anticipate extreme hurdles in the future if you seek to play Dungeons & Dragons. There is nothing more difficult than figuring out when to play next. People will have unforeseen obstacles popping up every time. You must do your best, and still you must expect to fail often. It's normal. It doesn't say anything about you as a person or a player, and definitely is just random universal chaos at work. That being said, once you've got a group together, schedule the first session as fast as possible. Keep that adrenaline pumping. Bringing all of you together will mean you're ready to get started. Between now and your first session, commonly called Session 0 for reasons you will get to find out once you actively listen to my insistence and play Dungeons & Dragons, I would suggest you take a bit of time and think. Now, for a slight intermission. I would really like to dive into how strange and interesting the social dynamic around meeting people for the purpose of doing an activity together is. It's not like a group project, there's no teacher to force you into it, and they're not your colleagues at work either. You don't necessarily see each other around in class, there's no playground that you share for whatever other activity and has now become this melting pot of personalities. It's all very organic and yet inorganic at the same time. For all the introverts out there, maybe you'll have a great time. Maybe, knowing you're all interested in this roleplay thing, you'll make some friends. And before you have to start making friends, there's a whole other set of stuff you gotta do, such as understanding what you're playing, who your characters are, and figuring out when to actually start. So, priorities. In an ideal utopic world, every player I've ever played with, including me, has read the book of the roleplay game you're about to engage in and knows the rules. At the same time, in a utopia, they are all equally willing to say, you know what, frick the rules, let's change stuff to make it more fun for ourselves. That is to say, we'll all appreciate it if you can at least skim the rules or watch a video about them. Not this one, though. This one is just a convincing, long argument. I'll probably link a few in the description. So, instead of doing reading like a nerd, think about your favorite character. Remember what book or movie or comic or whatever they were from. Do you want to try and play as them or something like them? Are they interesting to you, and did they make you think about why they are the way they are? Is there something else you feel about them other than, OMG, he's literally me? What I'm building to is the fact that you should spend the time before session 0 to find an archetype you want to play. Just find your guy, get the idea out of your brain, and just look at it a little. Rewatch that movie with the characters you like. Reread the wiki page of the game or book they were from. If you want to play an already existing character, you gotta understand who that character is, and then, for the love of God and everything else, please twist that character in a way that makes sense to you. In a very basic sense, that's the way to... No, hold on. So, here's the thing. It's okay to play my boy Nuts from Berserk. It's fine if you want to pretend you're Sherlock Holmes or Princess Peach or Godzilla or whatever, as long as you understand them. Why are they that way? What do they want? What's their deal, Coming up with an original character is really tough. It's a big endeavor, and if you haven't played stuff like this before, it won't be easy. Hell, it sometimes isn't easy even if you have. So how do we come up with a character? Like I said, archetype, dude. Robin Hood. I always go for Robin Hood. I start off dreaming up a good-hearted rascal of a character with a call for adventure and a general good vibe. You might choose something a bit more serious, like, Arthas from Warcraft, for example. It's cool to start by finding a character that embodies what you're looking for and get inspired by it. Hell, your GM might even want to help you craft that character and integrate it into the story. Big warning here though, make sure you change your character and you change the archetype you want, and forget that they're the main character in that story you took them from. In this story and the one you'll embark on, it means you've got friends, and they're not gonna let you go at it alone. If you do make one of these loner characters, you'll see very quickly that you separate yourself from the others, you dismiss interesting interactions to choose to brood and be by yourself, and it never works. Every player I've ever had wants to be a rascal with a heart of gold, and by confusing the archetype with the main character idea, ends up playing a selfish jerk because the world of tabletop RPGs doesn't allow them to force themselves onto the story as if they were the main character. it just doesn't gel well with the idea of a group activity and ends up being more of an obstacle than you think. Plus, it's not fun for the player either. So, going back to my Mr. Hood, you want to be a big hero. You like helping those in need. Cool. Why? Right? What do you get out of it? What's your end goal? What happens after the end goal is met? Are you willing to change or die trying? Are you imagining the character and having fun with it? Or is it just a cool main character that you like? It's all about asking questions, which is why I keep doing it so far in this section. A lot of the time, people I play with or DM for have a really hard time answering questions simply. That is to say, you can absolutely play D&D without being a master storyteller or a character writer or whatever other narrative type creative person you can think of. You can be that average Joe and come up with a complex story that has, emotions tied to it. I just want to make sure that you understand that if you aim to be the main character, the majority of systems won't allow it. The rules don't always mention it, not really, but it is a social activity and the group is the main character. The group, the party, the team. We need to really simplify the way we think about our characters, and I think it's unfair to expect most players to do what I'm listing here, but I also think a certain amount of frustration has built around this for me because it's not about having all of the answers in session 0. It's about being able to ask these questions and respond to the way the story and the game changes your character, not always the other way around. In session 0, you're going to discover who your character and other player characters are, and this means that you need a simple backstory and a simple description. Then you can pick a class or whatever the RPG system you're using needs, and sometimes Session 0 is even used for collaborative narrative construction, which is where you and your newly formed group can decide aspects of the story and the world together. You can matter in this world, as a player and as a character. It can be a shared activity, and many systems encourage making the outline of the places and the situations you're in together. Other times, Session 0 is used to put detail into your character and their relationships to each other and the world. This is also collaborative, but instead of letting you start from a simple archetype, it'll force you to build a past connection with the world around you. Maybe you'll get to know another character and then evolve the starting setting of the game that way. It's relatively simple to do, and with a good game master, you will often find yourselves in the actual game rather quickly, but it is helpful for everyone involved to know why they're there, what they're going to be doing, and where they want to be going. But what if, you might ask, I have an idea for a character that I don't know how to create in this world? I mean, look, remember when I said knowing the rules is equally as important as being okay with changing the rules? RPGs have a term called homebrew, aka making stuff up that isn't in the book. There's plenty of it out there, decades of the stuff. If you want a wacky thing, ask your group members, and if they're okay with it, do it. You'll figure it out. There's many ways to make the most of what your brain is telling you. Ideas are good to have, and you should nurture them. Yes, some of them may not get used in their current form, but it's just a draft and a matter of time until your relationship with the people you play with deepens to a degree where you can actually legitimately trust in each other's ability to bring these ideas to life. In the end, having a good character is just having a character you enjoy playing as. So focus on that, with the mention that if you playing your character is actively hurting other players' experience, you might need to ask yourself some more questions. Because whether you like it or not, it's a game you play together, and Crazy, right? It's true though. All of your friends have a certain level of trust in you, and they care for you, and will, to a certain degree, think twice before selling your soul to the devil for 16 gold coins. Like I said, meeting people with a common interest may end up netting you some new friendships. At the very least, there will definitely be moments before and after you roll dice where you talk about yourselves and maybe even share some stories and opinions. Not to say every D&D or equivalent party will be BFFs and hang out for drinks in between sessions. It's likely that you will enjoy some people's company more than others, and that's normal. I've come to make a distinction between socializing and actively trying to make friends. Maybe it's a specific thing for my situation, but I sometimes just want to socialize. It's a bit of a habit I've picked up, and even if I'm not hanging out with my best friends, it'll still get the job done to have a drink or go for lunch or play an activity with people I know. With role-playing games, you'll spend a lot of your time pretending. A player named Dave will probably spend 90% of their time while you're in play as Drakkar the Demon Bandit. They may have stuff in common, since it's more than expected to put parts of yourself within your character, but the way Drakkar talks about it, what they hide and show, or their effect on their worldview may be very different from Dave's. But boy, is it nice to feel close to Dave, in a way that allows you to feel bad for him when he rolls a 1 on a Constitution save, or celebrate together when Drakkar does a cool backflip and takes down a lich. Being friends with your playmates will enhance the experience, and you as a person as well. For some reason, when I haven't quite solved yet, it's easier to pretend and act and project yourself somewhere else when you're alongside people you like. Your characters may also become friends. After all, you're slaying beasts and finding treasure together. You're keeping yourselves alive and sometimes causing mischief that you need to get out of. And that's also very nice. Sure, there is a certain amount of joy to be had when there's conflict between your characters. There's a level of interesting things can get to when you're being betrayed or baited by, a clone of a party member, for example. But you still need to get along before that. So don't start off thinking, I want to play a loner. Nobody likes loners, nobody likes edgelords, and nobody likes cruel people. Unless the theme is we're all villains. And maybe even then, if you're cruel to each other and don't give each other the time of day, your relationships, be it for your players or your characters, will never blossom. Do you feel good about your character? Nice. How about the others? How about KT's cheese-obsessed druid Annika, who wants to turn into a big enough bird to fly to the moon so she can taste if it's actually made of cheese? What do you feel about her? Did you or your character ever express interest towards why they are that way and what made them become so? I already said it's all about asking questions, and it is, in equal measure, about yourself as about others. Being nice is, first and foremost, being interested, and then maybe it's being caring. Does this still sound like fun? I hope it does. It's really fun for me to think about. I once played a character that was that Robin Hood spinoff, and I was incredibly focused on becoming a legend and slaying dragons, and my character was a stuck-up noble who wanted to prove their family wrong and who wanted, top of the list, to slay a dragon. Now this had ups and downs, but eventually we did it, and it was pretty fun, even if I didn't get the fame I wanted. My character got really close to his mates, and we built a pretty decent relationship with those people, and maybe one day I'll get to revisit Archibald, the noble archer, and make him a legendary dragon slayer by all rights. But enough about my character. We just got finished with yours, and now that you've found out a little about the others, hey, look, man, seriously, come on now, we need to do it. It's time to... Oh my god, you're doing it. You're here, it's so close. Hey, so Thanks for taking all of my pleading into consideration and getting going. It'll be pretty fun. Oh, you haven't convinced one of your pals to be the game master, to make up the core of the story and all the monsters and the items and the plot lines and then guide all of you through the whole thing? No? Well, what about if maybe you did it? Now, I know it's really tough. I know. So much reading, and this time you really can't skip it. Well, you can, and some people do, but if you want to have a good time, it's better to read all the things, and you need to apply a little bit of patience into it. This one's for all my aspiring GMs out there. Listen up. In my experience, being a game master is the most intensive part of playing RPGs. I mean, that's why they made some without a game master. That's also why I mentioned it can, to a degree, be a collaborative process. Most of us aren't super skilled writers or actors, so it stands to reason that if you, as a player, have anxieties, if you feel intimidated or believe there's too much you don't know or can't do well enough, then, so does the GM. However, I really enjoy being a GM, and I've got a huge list of things it taught me to be better at. There's also some learnings about the social aspect of things, and I'll mention it. Don't worry. First off, we need a story. If, as a player, I could steal Robin Hood as an archetype, when I am a GM, I could steal Nottingham Forest. I can copy the factions, the conflict, make every character in that story an NPC, and it's already a great story, right? Letting players fool around in there is gonna make it really fun. So yes, to a certain degree, GMing teaches you to steal ideas. Everything you read, watch, and consume can be recycled. And that's the real skill, adaptation. Not everything works as a direct import, and some stuff may be too complex. In the interest of staying relevant, let's say Dune is a little too much for the traditional D&D campaign. But of course, the idea of conflict between houses and a corrupt emperor can work. Even a desert with magical substances in it can work. I mean, hell, if you really wanted to go crazy, having premonition and a group of shadowy, influential, matriarchal figures also works. Just adapt it to a degree where you're comfortable with it. If you can grasp it, you can learn it, and ultimately evolve it as your players move through it. Eventually, you will have to throw a monster their way, or a group of bandits, or a trap, some sort of conflict, and that's where I learned challenge. Some things were too easy, too tough, too complicated. I admit I have fudged rolls and modified enemy HP on the fly. And you can too. Just keep in mind, your number one reason for doing this is the party needs to have fun. You will have the power to make them hurt. You can take away things they want. You can kick them while they're down, and sometimes it'll make you feel really good, but it's just, if it's you who's feeling good and no one else, it's not worth it. You're just playing the edgy loner again, except you're the GM now. You can definitely push their buttons, you can kill off some NPCs, or raise the stakes when you need to. That's just drama, baby, and that's something else I learned as a player and a GM. Characters in D&D tend to be inherently theatrical. A noble goody two-shoes knight with deep pockets and a love for adventure and saving the world. It doesn't really get more theatrical than that. And hey, a lot of us don't have the skills in this department. Keep in mind, even as a GM, you cannot hog the spotlight. You cannot play characters you don't know how to play, and you will often make mistakes, and that's perfectly fine. For one, a mistake in the story, as long as players don't know the story, is just another part of it. A surprising sequence of events. So, if theatrical is what you want, or don't want, it's important to tell players ahead of time. That way, everybody will allow themselves to be more comfortable at the table. Just make sure you all understand how everyone else wants to have fun, and try your damnedest to have fun together. I'll also make another thing very clear. If you don't enjoy something about you, the world, the character you play, or anything else, in this D&D game, it can be changed. You can bring it up. It will be discussed. Most of the time, nobody will mind an adjustment. It's not serious. It's just play. And if you will play with more joy when one thing would be different about your character's backstory, then so be it. GMing is also an exercise in patience, in exploration of the feelings your players' characters are going through. It's about setting up things for them to discover, and ultimately you'll understand the game and the world very differently from them. There are things that I've learned about the mechanics of the game, but also about how I can interact with the world around me in an improv situation that my players don't instinctively expect or think about. For example, most buildings tend to have weak spots and are often ruinous or close to being decrepit, so that makes them vulnerable to attack. Multi-level manors and temples are very difficult to orient yourself in, and there's a ton of secret rooms and corridors, and enemies can be everywhere, and most of them are weak to something, which it's not always made clear. All of these things I sometimes keep from my players and expose them to the information at important points in the story, helping them grow with the plot and get better at the game by learning the more hidden mechanics. Whether they do or not, that's up to them, but, ultimately, as a GM, should you choose this path, you will exercise level design and balancing, and you will create items and enemies for your players, or adapt existing things to your needs. You will have to improvise scenes, and you will have to invent new plot lines for your characters, and of course, most importantly, you will fail at getting them where you want them to be. And this, my apprentice, is the key to succeeding. Let them create their own destiny, put things in their path, set up consequences, and then have them deal with that. This'll work. You just gotta do it. How about some stuff you don't have to do? I've noticed a tendency in players to expect the GM to also be the project manager. It's somehow understood that if you are the GM, you are the most knowledgeable player at the table, and you can answer every question. You are responsible for organizing the players and setting up dates and times for the next session, and you've got ultimate control and irrevocable say over what happens in the game. All these things, one way or another, are false. The GM can be anybody, and sure, knowing all of the rules is good, but like I said, most of the rules can be adjusted for more fun. You're not responsible for organizing things. You have homework to do already. You're the GM. You gotta make the story, the maps, the encounters, and so on. You're not gonna project manage and set up a calendar invite or book a table or bring snacks just because the other players think you should. It's nice of anybody to do those things, so please bring them up and be transparent. For one thing, you might be a great storyteller, but a terrible organizer. You might act out the most heart-wrenching scenes, but don't want to worry about, the when do we play next. This should all be collaborative, and I keep coming back to that, but everyone at the table puts in effort in their own way to play the game. Everyone at the table should also put in the effort to make the game happen. Speaking of which, now that I've convinced you to take the mantle as a GM... Oh boy, it's actually happening this time. Don't panic. Reread your character sheet before session 1, ask your playmates any questions you might have, and get going. Follow your hearts and enjoy your character's wishes, desires, and fears, and so on. Experience this together and make sure to speak up when you don't enjoy or do enjoy something. If you've got stuff you don't want to see in your game, Let it be known. Comfort and fun are the keys to any good D&D game. Look, I've had some things happen in my time as a player and GM that I didn't always love, and I've seen players speak for other players. I've seen GMs be downtrodden because entire plot lines were thrown out the window because of a player. There has been conflict around players' attitudes towards NPCs and their preference to violence versus other more diplomatic means of conflict resolution. I'll never expect anyone to be perfect, and I'll never expect the GM to know everything there is to know about everything ever. Take a breather, relax, take a break, and we can talk about it later. Just keep in mind, when you start playing, you need to be considerate of everyone else at the table. A big advantage we have over kids playing together is the fact that we can express our emotions. Dungeons & Dragons can be immensely fun. Role-playing itself can be incredibly complex, and you can lose many hours just thinking of ideas for a campaign, a cool fight, political intrigue, a horror section, or just imagining what the speech of an official should be when the party triumphantly returns. I'm really looking forward to playing more tabletop RPGs. There's been so much to learn and explore, and I'm far from finished with it. This is just my extensive plea for you, yes, even you, to give it a shot. There's not enough time in the world to say how dense the experience can be and how much you can develop when attempting to make these ideas come to life. There's a reason it's popular, and it isn't just because some kids played it on a Netflix show once. It's the simple act of play, and it's pushed to a degree that may be up your alley, and if it isn't, there's thousands of options out there with more or fewer things you need to do. Equally though, taking part in it and sharing the experience with somebody else is unlike anything else I've ever done before. And that's it. Thank you so much for listening to me rant about it for 38 minutes currently. I'm really excited to see if this video reaches anybody who has the same kind of enthusiasm towards it, or who just has questions and wants to know more. And I mean, if you do, just drop them in the comments somewhere. I'm more than happy to read them again. And obviously, I don't know everything. I haven't played for 30 years, and even if I had, I don't think I would have known everything there was to know. Just, thank you for listening, and I will maybe do this again sometime.